goes through to round number 3, in case of a draw, we will see the tie breaks. Pawn to e4. And what will be Gukesh's choice? He goes for the Caro-Kann. Very interesting choice. I love how Gukesh, is trying to fight for the full point with the black pieces. Not playing like something solid, make a draw quickly. The Caro-Kann, e takes d5. I'm pretty sure Nogerbek was prepared for this, because this is what Gukesh also played against Hikaru in the India versus USA match in Texas recently. Bishop d3, the exchange variation, bringing the bishop to a good square. Knight comes to c6, attacking the pawn on d4. You defend it with pawn to c3. And now, white would love to play bishop f4. So in order to stop it, you go queen to c7. So you stop bishop f4, pawn to h3, so that when you go knight f3, there is no bishop g4 business coming in. And Gukesh says, I anyway don't want to bring my bishop outside the pawn chain. I'll play e6. Yes, the bishop is a bit passive, but Gukesh has a clear plan in mind. He first brings his bishop to d6. And next he would like to bring his knight to e7. Meanwhile, Nogerbek castles here and Gukesh brings his knight to e7. Both players blitzing out their moves, and Nogerbek brings his rook to e1. And black also castles. Usually black's ideas revolve around knight g6, f6, e5, but b3 played here, and multiple ideas, bishop b2, maybe bishop a3, but more importantly, pushing the pawn to c4. This is what Nogerbek might want to do here. a6, Gukesh is waiting here, pushes his pawn to a6, then just cleans that pawn and presses the clock. I guess pawn to c4 makes a lot of sense here and should be a good move. But Nogerbek goes bishop a3. And while this move trades the good bishop of black, one must remember that the c3 pawn is a bit soft. So Gukesh goes knight g6. A good move. And this pawn on c3 is a bit weak. So if you don't play c4 at the right time, then that could be a bit of a trouble. Bishop takes d6. And now Gukesh comes back and takes it back with the queen. Well, playing c4 might be a slightly difficult now with the d4 pawn becoming so weak. So he takes on g6. Interesting choice by Nogerbek. Essentially his bishop was really good, but what he's saying is that your remaining bishop is worse. I have two knights, your knight is well placed, but what about this bishop? Knight to e5, and again trading the knights so that you are left with a bishop against knight scenario. Gukesh is like, I want some juice in the position. He doesn't trade it, he goes back to e7. Now h4. Is this an idea to somehow try and play h5, get the queen in, maybe then swing the rook over? That is sometimes a typical attacking idea, but Gukesh kicks the knight away first. f6 played. And now the knight must move away. I think knight d3 makes a lot of sense because it can go to f4 to put pressure here, can go to c5 to also put pressure on e6. Bishop comes to d7. And one of the plans is now to go bishop e8 to f7. That's what black would want to do. Knight d2 played. Nogerbek adjusts all the white pieces there and then presses the clock. He has 58 minutes. Gukesh also has 58 minutes. Now rook to c8. A very nice, useful move, putting pressure on the c3 pawn. And then maybe rook c7, doubling on the c file. He goes rook to c1. Will be interesting to see how Gukesh continues. He goes rook c7. He wants to double down the c file. And Nogerbek now plays knight to f3. While the c3 pawn is a bit weak on the half open black file, the e6 pawn is a bit weak on the half open white file. Rook comes to c8, attacking the pawn on c3. I believe queen d2 is what will be played here. And Nogerbek does play queen d2. It has an additional option of going queen f4. Gukesh plays the typical maneuver here, bishop e8. Because you want to put your bishop on f7, defending the d5 pawn to enable f5, e5 at some point. He goes g3. But a better idea could have been queen f4, takes, giving up the c3 pawn for the e6 pawn. But g3 was played and Gukesh goes bishop f7, king comes up to g2. And is black slowly taking over is the big question here. Let's see. Knight goes to f5. A useful move for the knight, and maybe Nogerbek can kick the knight away with g4 and play this queen f4 business, giving up c3, trying to fight for the e6 pawn. But actually he is not interested in that. He goes rook e2. I'm not so sure with this. Where are you headed? Maybe you want to double, but then when you double you lose the c3 pawn. a5 played by Gukesh. Maybe a4 is on the cards. Queen goes to e1. And now rook to c6 played. The rook is putting pressure down the c file. Rook c2 is on the board. Trying to defend here. Pawn to b6. And now queen d2. So he just made this small maneuver to bring the rook to c2, bringing the queen and tripling down the c file. Well, somewhere there could be threats of taking on d4 when the c2 rook would be hanging. Knight comes to f4 for Nogerbek. And Gukesh goes b5. Now, one thing is clear, this does weaken the c5 square. But is it a big deal? He comes back. This is interesting. Can you jump into c5 with the knight? Or can Gukesh sacrifice an exchange? He goes knight d6. Now this question, knight c5, you can actually take here. And black is doing really well because e5 is coming. So queen e3 played. He doesn't jump in. Gukesh goes knight f5. Again, he is not jumping into e4 because of c4. So knight f5. Queen comes to d2. He comes back to d6. Some back and forth here. Nogerbek goes queen e3. He's like, Gukesh, do you want to draw and go into tie breaks? Gukesh says, no, sorry. Queen a7. 7 minutes to Gukesh. 6 minutes to Nogerbek. 9 more moves to make. Knight to c5. And now you can't take here because queen is also looking, but e5 is tremendously strong. It's a very strong move because it weakens the knight on c5. And Gukesh now zones in. He knows that there is some mistake and pushes e5. If d takes e5 attacking the knight, I go knight f5 and pick up this knight. So b4 played here. Nogerbek tries to sort of solidify his knight on c5. But Gukesh moves forward with his pawn. e4. Suddenly, white is in big trouble. Knight goes to h2. A knight jumps into c4, attacking the queen on e3. And queen to e2 played. He jumps knight a3, attacking the rook on c2. Rook comes to b2. He jumps back, trying to gain some time now. Gukesh has 3 minutes. 1 minute for Nogerbek. We are on move 36. Rook comes back to c2. And now pushing forward with f5. f4 is on cards. And here he goes f4, trying to stop the move, but he's given white a passer. A takes b4 by Gukesh, opening up the a file. He takes c takes b4. The queen is active now, can enter in here. Yes, he moves in, queen to a3. If you go rook c3, then queen takes b4 is hanging. He comes back, knight f1, but isn't b4 hanging? Gukesh chops off the pawn. Queen takes b4. You can look at Nogerbek there. He's unhappy. 40 moves have been completed. Queen to f2. And now the best way to play is just rook a8, rook c7, rook a7. Go after the a2 pawn. And that's exactly what Gukesh does. With 30 extra minutes on the clock, this is going to be not at all difficult for Gukesh to convert. Extra pawn, a passer on the e file, a strong knight on c4. Nogerbek plays his rook to c3. And now you can go e3. You can also take on c5 and then start e3, d4. Oh, that would be so powerful. But Gukesh tries to keep it simple. Goes queen a5, attacking the pawn on a2. And rook comes back to c2. Let's see how the game continues. Queen to d8. Knight comes back to b3. And now rook a6. Pressurizing the a2 pawn. Rook e2. And b4. Well, this move controls the c3 square, but more importantly, you want to get your bishop into the game. Yeah, that's the point. Bishop e8, trying to get to a4 or b5. So queen comes to e1. He defends the b4 pawn. And rook to f2. And he brings his rook to a3. Knight jumps into e3, pressurizing the d5 pawn. He takes on e3 with a check. Queen takes e3, and it's time for the bishop to now make a grand entry. This is what happens when you have a bishop that's not so great but is doing a great job. You can see that this bishop was all limited by its own pawns, but now when it gets outside the pawn chain, all these pawns are going to help it, like bishop c4, bishop d3. All these are beautiful squares for the bishop. Rook b2, and he goes bd3, limiting the queen. And now you can think about entering on the c file. Queen e1. What I've actually liked about this game from Gukesh is his very sort of calm and cool approach. He's not rushing into anything. You can see him one move at a time. Improve your knight first, then improve your bishop, now improve your queen. Bring all your pieces to their maximum potential, like the rook on the a file, putting pressure on a2. And now queen c3. He comes back, queen d2. And Gukesh lets the queen be taken because of pawn takes here. So queen comes back to d1. And is it already time to push the e pawn? Yes, he does. Pawn to e3. Yes, you can attack the queen, but there's a very strong move now, which is pawn to e2. Yes, pawn to e2 played here. If you take the queen, I'll take your queen here. So he takes on e2. Bishop e2 taken. And now rook takes e2 will be met with rook takes pawn. So you have to take on e2 with the queen. And now there's a nice finishing shot with a small queen sacrifice. Can you find it? It's very pretty. Yes, queen takes b2. If you take the queen, I go rook a2, winning your queen, pinning it. Nogerbek resigns with a smile. Gukesh wins a classy positional battle in the Caro-Kann, and he moves on to round number 3 at the FIDE World Cup 2025. Excellent performance by the youngster here, and in round number 3 he will meet Frederick Swanner, which is going to be a very interesting battle to follow.